Coming up next on The Voice of Alabama Politics, Governor Bentley wants more taxes. Also, the V-Team takes a look at presidential candidates wooing Dixie. And Speaker Mike Hubbard testified before the Lee County grand jury. Guess what? They indicted him anyway. All this and much, much more coming up next on The V.
The Voice of Alabama Politics with your host, Bill Brett, and the V-Team with Claire Austin, Susan Britt, Jack Campbell, Baron Coleman, Charlana Spencer, and special reports with Jonathan Barbie. Now, the #1 political show in Alabama, The V.
Welcome to The Voice of Alabama Politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt, and as always, I'm joined by the V-Team. Welcome all.
Good morning.
Governor Bentley has now released his tax package for the second special session of 2015. Susan, what's changed?
Nothing. Actually, he's just released all the same ideas that he had for the first session. So we've got the cigarette tax again, we've got the business privilege tax. I'm not sure what he's driving at here. It didn't work the first time. I don't think it's going to work again. The Senate is standing dead pat against raising taxes at all.
Oh, what's changed is the Speaker says he's now behind the governor in raising taxes. So therefore, the only changes, I guess, that for some reason the governor believes that the Speaker can deliver the House members to vote for this package. And if I were a betting woman, I would say that that will not be the case.
That's certainly what we're hearing, Claire. And you know, I know I brought this up earlier this week. We were notified that there was a meeting of some of the House and the Senate up in North Alabama, and looks like they've got their own plan coming out.
Yeah, I must have missed it. And granted, it was a hectic campaign season last year. I certainly missed Governor Bentley's plan to raise taxes. I must have missed Mike Hubbard's plan to raise taxes during the campaign season last year. I'm confused by the change of heart. I congratulate the Senate for sitting tight and saying we didn't campaign on raising taxes. In fact, many of us campaigned on quite the opposite, not raising taxes, and we're not going to go back on our word just because it's politically convenient. We're going to make some tough decisions, some tough choices, and we've got our money, and we're going to figure out how much of it can be spent.
Claire, remember, there was the campaign, they call them flip-floppers?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's exactly what's happened here.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this, you know, the shocking thing is here we have a Republican governor, a Republican Speaker of the House, and they want to raise taxes. I mean, is Mike still in bed with the Porch Creek Indians to try to get their gaming bill done? Does anybody know?
It's been very quiet lately.
It's been quiet, and the fact that Senator Del Marsh, the pro tem of the Senate, saying he's not, or at this point, he's not bringing up the gaming bills in the next special session.
Right.
That's what has been talked about lately.
Yeah, he did say that. Now, Baron, one of the things we've heard, and I think this is right, is Paul Sanford's going to bring up a lottery.
Well, Paul Sanford has two big proposals. One is the lottery, a standalone lottery without the casino-style gaming attached to it. I don't think it will go anywhere during the special session, but he's certainly free to bring it. The one I do think he's getting some momentum on is this budget bill he has, which is to take all the money, put it into one fund. I mean, I think to get around the Constitution, you have to put it all in the Education Trust Fund, and then pull 22% of it out, put it in the general fund budget, and that is your allotment. That's how much you get.
Right. I think something that concerns me on that is we don't actually spend 78% of the budget on education, do we? It's a lot of pork, isn't it?
It's more like about 54 to 55%, and if you go back and look at the Busman plan as well, it'll reflect the same amount. There's a lot of pork in education that has nothing to do with education. I know in past we've revealed that peanut festivals coming out of, and all this little pork going to communities.
It's been that way for years. Yeah. And if they really would clean all the pork out of the education budget, it would be astounding how much money's really in there.
How much is the Busman plan and the Sanford plan? I mean, they're very similar, aren't they?
They're similar. The only difference I see, the primary difference I see, is in the Busman plan, he's honest about what's being spent on education. Because right now everybody believes 78% of our budgeted money goes to education. The reality is, as Busman points out, Senator Busman says, really it's 53, 54, 55%. So what he does is he calls education expenditures education. Sanford leaves, the Department of Commerce, the peanut festivals, the legislative expenditures, all the fluff that has over the years been shoved into the education budget. He leaves it in the education budget. Busman pulls it out, and that's the primary difference between the two.
Well, also in the Busman plan, he protects that 55% for education. In other words, it can never go below that.
Right.
Puts a cap on it.
Puts a cap on it, and if it ever does, then there has to be another revenue generator.
Well, it puts a floor on it, not a cap.
Right.
Yeah, floor.
Yeah, floor.
And
Sorry.
under the Sanford plan, there is no floor, so they could continue calling things education that are clearly not education.
And that's where the problem is, I think.
Well, I hope, Senator Sanford and Senator Busman are both very bright, good senators from up in North Alabama. And I think if the two of them can work together, I think the two of them should be able to come out with something
Very level-headed
Level-headed,
senators.
that's correct.
And conservative. They're not some of these borrow and spend.
No,
conservatives.
not at
they're
all.
conservative people, and they are truly and honestly and wholeheartedly trying to do what's right for the taxpayers of the state of Alabama and really work out
And what's
problems.
sensible without a lot of carrying on. Just very sensible. This is what it is. This is how it should be, and this is a logical way to approach it.
And what's very interesting, you always see, and I think maybe some of y'all will agree with, when you get in really, really tough times, that's when you see true leadership emerge, when you get in critical times, and I think you're seeing that, particularly in the Senate with these two.
Well, and these guys don't have to have this job. They do well on their own. They're not
Both
somebody,
of them are probably losing money being in the
That's
legislature.
exactly correct.
I know I talked to Senator Busman one day, and he said, I had 135 patients waiting for me, or something crazy like
Right.
that. And Sanford's got a very successful
Restaurant.
restaurant business. And that new, what's his sauce he's got now?
The seasoning or the sauce?
The
He's got a
seasoning.
The Cajun, the camouflage seasoning.
Camouflage seasoning. I saw that.
Being is it the grandson or the great-grandson of Bob Gibson's?
Yeah,
If anybody from that area
Yeah.
knows anything about Bob Gibson's.
Do you think, and I'm not hearing anything really, but do you think that they're leaving Mike out of this thing up in North Alabama, aren't they? This meeting with the Senate and the House.
Well, it's by design.
Yeah.
It's by design. Mike Hubbard has become an obstacle to progress in getting the budget done. And if you talk to members of the House and Senate, they're telling you that. When you talk to them, they say, look, Mike Hubbard has become an obstacle to getting a budget. He's no longer leading, he's now creating problems.
How long does he allowed to continue to do this, though? I mean, will anybody stand up and say anything?
Claire?
Silence?
Well, I don't know between now and the end of 2015, I don't know the answer to
Yeah.
that, but surely to goodness in 2016 before we come back for the regular session.
But he's going to be gone 2/3 of the regular session. You got to prepare for the trial in February. You got the trial in March. There's 2/3 right
we
there.
don't even go in session until early February.
Right,
so.
exactly.
I mean, people are telling me that he wants to put Mac McCutcheon in there to do it, and they're telling me that's not going to work out like he thinks it is. But he's afraid to put anybody that's not his person in there.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to be interesting to watch. We're going to leave it right there. You're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back.
The V is sponsored by Spot On Strategies Group.
I am honored to stand with each and every one of you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. God bless you. God bless the United States.
We have come to take our country back.
Welcome back to The V, the voice of Alabama politics. Barron, this week, 3-judge panel, federal district, heard the redistricting of the legislative districts in Alabama. Basically, the judge told the plaintiffs, the Democrats, go back and draw me up a plan and let me look at it. I mean, what does this mean?
Well, it doesn't mean much right now. I mean, we've got to wait and see what their plan is and then let the judges look at it and see if it's a big enough difference that they think it's worth having new elections all over the state of Alabama. You know, if you're going to use race, and you have to, if you're going to use race to help draw districts, there are very narrow ways to use it. And you can't use it as a primary factor. And that's why the Supreme Court sent it back down. They said, you didn't answer that question. Was it used as a primary factor? And so it'll be interesting. The plaintiffs, the Black Democratic Caucus and the Democrats will come together. They'll draw a plan. But they've got to use the same factors, the 1% deviation, county boundaries, and all those things.
You know, Susan, we heard a lot of press reports, but then when you talked to the other side, it was sort of a different story.
It was. The press seemed to go only to the plaintiffs. They didn't bother to talk to, the defense there. And in talking to the defense, they said, this is really not as simple as it sounds. The judge gave them 30 days. It'll go back, they'll do a plan. They'll go back to the district judge. It'll probably get kicked back up to the Supreme Court. And even if it gets kicked back up there, it still has to go back through the legislature again. And most of those legislators like their seats.
Yeah, they're not going to vote to. They're not going to vote to redistrict.
I don't know that I disagree with that. I don't know that it has to go back to the legislature. I mean, the judges are the judges for a reason. They could say these were not done fairly. We don't trust you guys to do it the same way. It's a new legislative body essentially. I mean, in 2014 they ran under the new. There's no way to go back in time to 2010 districts. Right. Bring all those people back together and have them redraw fair boundaries. Yeah. And so I can see the judges doing it themselves.
Well, and let's back up, but let's go back to Alabama politics 20, 30 years ago. Not until recently had the legislators drawn their legislative districts. In history, in the past, it had always gotten thrown to the courts, and the courts had drawn the districts.
Well, it looks like court may do it
this
again.
is not different or anything unusual in Alabama. Now, it's been unusual, I'd say, the last 10 to 12 years, but look back 20, 25 years ago.
I mean, some of the legislators are saying they believe that the law demands it comes back to them. But
well, and that's the thing is both sides are going to spin it to their own advantage.
Yeah, of course. I heard that Andrew Brasher, the guy for the state, I heard he was outstanding. They gave him full marks for his job. Very cool.
He's a brilliant lawyer. Yeah. I mean, he really is.
Yeah. He was down at the Hubbard hearing, and one of the press guys said, hey, what's Brasher doing here? Well, I said, he's brought his Harvard law degree.
Yeah. And it showed quite well.
Well, hey, that's a compliment to the state that we can, recruit and lure those type of people to work in state government, because it truly is a public servant to give up that.
He's a smart guy. I want to switch topics here to this. We have a new joint legislative reform committee. They're here to reform the state pension fund. I talked with Dr. Bronner. He wasn't all that impressed with the second hearing or second meeting that they had, but they've got 16 lawmakers, not financial analysts, who want to reform the pension plan. What are you hearing, Susan?
I'm hearing that there's a lot of confusion in the financial community based on what they're hearing come out of this committee. The most, as Claire would say, egregious of ideas is they're trying to base, I think, on California and go ahead and lower the interest rates.
The assumption,
interest rates on what we're drawing. So you tell me, okay, I should get, instead of getting $10 on 10 cents on a dollar, I get 7 cents on a dollar. Now, what kind of sense does that really make?
I don't think they knew what they were talking about.
I think they need some financial experts.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure there are some that are elected to the Alabama legislature. I'm just not sure if they're part of that panel.
Well, I mean, Arthur Orr's a co-chair. He's a smart guy.
Right.
He's a smart guy. This is being led, the best I can tell, the Johnson Center at Troy University is really pushing a lot of this. And for some reason, Troy has allowed themselves to be prostituted out by people who are in the business of privatizing everything in sight. What they want to do is take our defined benefit plan and turn it into a defined contribution plan. You can't do that. You cannot do that without costing the state billions and billions and billions of dollars, because today's workers are paying for yesterday's workers.
Right.
And if today's workers are no longer paying for yesterday's workers, but they're putting it in their own account, well, who pays for yesterday's workers? The state of Alabama does. The taxpayers do. and it doesn't work.
And it's not explained, and
You think
all it
they've thought
does
of
is
that yet?
it just scares the
They're
daylights.
being paid not to.
It scares the daylights out of these retirees and people that are.
They should. It should.
One of the other things they brought up in there was, what can we do for the millennials?
Yeah, they want to go ahead and lower the age so the millennials can get involved.
Yeah, so like we invest at 10 years, now you invest at 5. But that goes back to your argument.
Yeah, no, it does. It doesn't. This is ludicrous. This
It's
is absolutely
egregious.
insane.
That's what it really is.
I said it was your word, Claire. I
I
did.
know. Don't be using the word. You didn't say it loud enough.
Well, listen,
anyway.
the reality is there are tens of billions of dollars locked up in this, and the legislators want access to it. Right. And taking it away from RSA, shifting the way it's done, opens up all kinds of creeks and crevices where they can get in there and get access to the money.
Well,
Let's be
look,
honest.
Wall Street wants that money. The 401,
Okay,
Financial
programs.
advisors.
Yeah, they want that money.
Absolutely.
They want that money. And gosh, this thing's been around working for a long time. I don't know that they'll get it changed.
It's been
but,
since the 1940s. It's been.
you
This
know,
way.
I mean, all this stuff the other reforms we've seen haven't been so reformative.
Almost every one of them's backfired.
Yeah.
And now we want to take hundreds of thousands of state employees and put their retirement in jeopardy because somebody said, "Oh, this might work."
Yeah.
A retirement that they paid into.
Yeah.
Right. Well, they can't go bankrupt like a corporation. The state's always going to be on the hook. for it.
Exactly.
That's
I mean,
correct.
so that's
Exactly.
the deal. One of the other things that
It's a bad scare tactic, though, for
it
retirement.
is.
It is.
Very
It
bad.
is.
And millennials, they're not thinking about retirement. They're going to live forever right now.
Mm-hmm.
We've had Donald Trump, we've had Jeb Bush, we've had
Ted
Scott
Cruz.
Walker, we've had Ted Cruz. The only person we haven't had, basically, Hillary Clinton hadn't shown up, and Bernie Sanders, we've had them all. I mean,
Well, there's a few Republicans we hadn't had. We need to get into the state.
What do you make of all this, Claire?
Well, I mean, we're part of the presidential primary because we're in March, and so they want to come here and let the people get to know them. So it's good for the state of Alabama. It brings it to the people here. I mean, it's a wide open field right now.
Yeah, we sell a lot of, but I heard they sold a lot of, Trump's got the hat market sewn up.
Oh yeah, Trump sells a lot of hats. The only people that benefit from this are the Republican Party and the Democratic Party of Alabama, because it's going to cost $25,000 to get on the ballot in Alabama. If we were still in June, most of these people would have already dropped out by then. But now the Republican Party coffers, if 16, 17 people try to get on the ballot, the coffers will be exploding.
Well, right now
Yeah,
it
but
looks
wait
like,
a minute. It brings a little revenue when they come to town. And they got to bring their out-of-state people in, then wherever city they're in, whether it's Tuscaloosa, Talladega, Mobile, Montgomery. I mean, there's some revenue generated.
Yeah, it has some economic impact.
A little
well,
economic impact.
I think they all should come, even Hillary and Bernie and the whole gang.
Bernie's
I'd like to
been-
get them all in one room at the same time.
no,
Now, wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah, with machine guns.
We don't need a presidential debate here.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. You're watching The V. We'll be right back. The Chetties is what I was going to say.
Sadly, this happens too often in families with autistic children.
First nightmare, their child wanders off, disappears, and is nowhere to be found.
Where her body was found just a couple hours ago.
An autistic boy wanders away from home and dies.
Welcome back to The V, the voice of Alabama politics. Our guest today is Lyndon Baines Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Cronkite. It's a pleasure to be here today.
How are you doing, Jack?
I'm all right. What's happening?
Oh, you are happening.
Clarine?
You caught me by surprise.
Interesting thing, that, we've covered this Howard Gene Sisson story, which the rest of the media seems to have forgotten exists, except for you and Barron and us here. But Howard Gene Sisson, special agent, fired from the AG's office for aiding Mike Hubbard, the defense, to undermine the grand jury in Lee County. Now another judge has said basically that Luther was right in firing him. General Strange was right to fire Gene Sisson. Amazing that this was going on, isn't it, Jack?
Well, I mean, it's sort of a no-brainer. I mean, when you look at a guy on the inside, paid for being paid by the state of Alabama to do a prosecution of Mike Hubbard, and he's leaking information to Mike Hubbard's lawyers. I mean, saying that was a justifiable termination is a no-brainer.
Well,
Courageous.
Yeah.
At least.
A lot of those that were in the AG's office that were doing the same, he's not the only one. They did the right thing. They all should have been gone.
Well, this guy took it to the employment personnel court.
He's appealed it twice.
Yeah.
He's failed twice.
He's a desperate man.
Yeah.
Well, and look, he's gone on to work at another job, and he's, I guess, trying to put this behind him. One thing I'll say is the story here is not so much Gene Sisson, but the media's ignoring of the Gene Sisson story. Largely outside of ALReporter.com, largely the media has completely ignored this. Each publication put a little blurb with their own positive spin on it, but you have a guy, as you pointed out, undermining a prosecution.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if somebody in the Obama Justice Department was undermining the prosecution of Hillary Clinton over missing emails? What would Alabama's newspapers be writing on a daily basis? How many 14-part spreads would you see?
That would be the top story. And the other thing, and Claire, is that Mark White is wanting to use Gene Sisson as one of his key witnesses to prove prosecutorial misconduct.
I think that's fabulous. What better wish could the prosecution ask for?
Judge Wood, who heard this case, said that Sisson had let his dislike of Matt Hart color his thinking so much he couldn't make sound.
You know what
decisions.
I believe in? I believe, and I'm just an ordinary citizen with no degree except a bachelor's, but I believe that both Sonny Reagan and Gene Sisson should have to refund the money the state paid them while they were leaking information to the other side.
Very valid point, and I didn't mention his name, but you're right. They were doing that at the same time. I think that's...
And they should refund that money to the state of Alabama.
Well, they've cleaned up over there. They've gotten rid of Gene Sisson, of course, and then they got rid of Sonny Reagan. Before that.
And Kevin Turner.
Kevin Turner's gone, and
Tim Furman.
Tim Furman's gone. But I'm hearing they've doubled the size of Matt Hart's office. I'm hearing that.
I understand there have been additional hires. I mean, you're hearing the same thing out on the street. That's probably a good thing. I think they were understaffed. I think they were understaffed from the beginning. When you're talking about handling a case primarily against Mike Hubbard, though that unit does handle other cases. They prosecuted Deanne Stone. They attempted to prosecute Lowell Barron, for example. They have handled other cases. They were understaffed from the beginning. There were millions of pages of discovery in this, hundreds and thousands of hours of testimony, hundreds of witnesses. Can you really do that with a handful of people?
Yeah, I mean, these are what I'm hearing are not new budgeted positions. These are just positions that now they've allowed Matt Hart to fill.
Right. But think about it. Probably a lot of those individuals that we named were getting paid exorbitant rates when they were on the payrolls. And for example, some of these lawyers that were getting some of those exorbitant rates, they probably could have hired two for what one of those were getting paid.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing that scandal hopefully is behind them. But you're right, Barron, the press has ignored this. They just put out whatever Hubbard's people tell them to put out.
That's the scandal. That's the scandal.
Their articles are probably written by Mark White.
They read like that.
I mean, they do.
But the good thing, speaking of the good thing, is that Luther has bought the former U.S. Attorney Alice Martin in there, and she's a tremendous administrator, a great lawyer, and she's been cleaning the house.
Yeah, and she looks like a woman who knows how to wield a broom.
I'm all for that, baby.
Listen, often in Montgomery, the smartest man in the room is a woman, so that's a lot of times the case. One of the other things that came up this past week, we did a story. Court documents revealed that not only a lot of the folks we had believed testified to the grand jury, including Bob Riley, Minda Campbell Riley, and so on and so forth, but Mike Hubbard himself testified before the Lee County grand jury, and they still indicted him, Jack, on 23 felony counts of public corruption. He couldn't even make his own defense.
Well, I don't even know. Did he have to go testify?
Yeah, he was subpoenaed, I guess.
You don't have to testify.
I didn't think he would. I don't know why he would.
Well, and from a criminal defense perspective, there are very few instances where I would allow a client or I would advise a client to go testify in front of a grand jury. It does make you look somewhat innocent, but there's no opportunity for cross-examination in a grand jury. Your lawyer is not allowed in there. And every word, everybody's watched NYPD Blue knows, every word you say will be used against you.
In a court of law.
Absolutely. I just think I was stunned when I read that.
One thing Mike Hubbard is a good salesman. I mean, he gives a good talk, and he really got people persuaded. But gosh, he couldn't even convince these 18 people not to indict him.
Not anymore.
Well, I'm going to tell you, if he couldn't convince 18 people, there must be a preponderance of evidence that he is one guilty man.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you know, I think this, Barron, goes to this argument that people say you'll never find 12 people in Lee County that'll convict him.
No, you found 18 that were willing to send it to trial.
Yeah.
I'll say this, you mentioned it and I sort of swept it aside. Yeah, they can subpoena you. Actually, they usually don't, but they can. But you have a Fifth Amendment right to silence.
Right.
I mean, that's, again, NYPD Blue. You have the right to remain silent throughout the entirety of the proceedings.
And we understand he didn't remain silent, but we don't have any idea what he said.
Well, no one does. It's sealed by the grand jury secrecy rule.
Not yet.
And
who knows? Mark White and them they've asked for so many other things to come out.
They've already received it.
Right.
Yeah, they've received it. Mark White is the gift that keeps on giving. Though.
And remember, Greg Wren, state representative from Montgomery, avoided going to jail by resigning from the legislature and cutting a deal.
Well, you know, this is something, you're an attorney, and I don't get, I always thought Mark White had this reputation for being this super duper attorney. But I had one guy who's known him for 30 years the other day said, I don't know which Mark White showed up. But this guy keeps digging a grave for his client.
Well, and you can allude more on this, but if you look at really of his legal history, in the past he was not necessarily the lead lawyer in the case. He had a lot of other seasoned lawyers surrounding him, and he is the front man running this case and doesn't have all the elder wisdom and institution of
it just seems like one misstep after another.
He has done a good job of denying, deflecting, and delaying, as you coined. He's done a good job of that. He's done a very poor job of making his client look innocent.
Well, you know, he's the Maytag man. He's good at the spin cycle, but I don't know about what else.
We're going to have to leave it right there.
Good one, Jack.
You've been watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. You can catch new stories every day on alreporter.com. Like us on Facebook. Watch the show on YouTube or in the comfort of your own home every Sunday. Thanks for watching.
You go put that on the billboard. Mark White, Maytag man.
Yeah.
That's